We always look forward, Dave, don't we, to chatting with Andrew Reinhart, and he's coming in today.
Yeah. It is time for a little bit of time with Andrew Reinhart and Becoming Gift. Good morning, Andrew. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Pat, Dave, and Ron. How are you?
Great.
Fabulous.
Good.
Well, today on the segment, we wanted to talk, we're going through different principles of health and wellness for Catholics. Mm-hmm. And today I wanted to talk about Christ being our model. And to frame this up, I want to share an anecdote from my own life. I had began a health journey, and at one time I was about 400 pounds.
Oh, I can't believe that.
So losing weight was a big piece of my journey. And after a few years of the Lord really blessing my efforts through the help of, a wonderful doctor and, some counseling and great friends and a lot of grace, I'd lost about 200 pounds. Wow. But I remember one fateful morning, I was in the habit of sort of weighing myself when I woke up in the morning. And one morning I weighed myself and I realized I hadn't been this light since before 7th grade.
Oh my gosh.
I was a big kid.
Wow.
And then I looked at myself in the mirror and realized I wasn't happy with how I looked. Right. So I was smaller than I had been since before junior high.
Wow.
And something in me still wasn't satisfied with how I looked in the mirror. Mm-hmm. Right. And when I had that moment, it wasn't a glorious thing, obviously. I just realized, where is my heart? What's my model? What image of health and wellness do I have, and where does that come from? How has that been formed? And I realized there was this whole complex of, I think a mixture of messages from my childhood mixed with images I've gotten from the media, mixed with, my own beliefs and thoughts and, the kind of health gurus and different images you see online, right? I had this whole complex driving my image, my model, my ideal of what health meant for me. Mm-hmm. And kind of trying to square that with my faith and feeling a deep call that Jesus should be my model, that Christ should be my model, that Jesus is the image of the human being who's flourishing, the human face of God, the divine face of man, as our faith invites us to meditate on. So in my own life, I had to come to that realization that Jesus had to be my model. And there was, if you would have asked me 10, 20 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I'm trying to be like Christ. Mm-hmm. Right? But it was only through the journey that there's deeper and deeper layers revealed to me in God's merciful love of what's really driving me. Right. What's really pushing my inner impulses, my motivations, my drives. And so that really kind of caused an about-face, a shift in my health journey, focusing, I think, more holistically on, what's going on spiritually, my mental health, what's going on with my body image, do I truly love myself, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes, frankly, a lot more complicated. One thing, if the goal is just to sort of make the number get smaller, right, it's a lot easier. If the goal is to be like Jesus Christ, there's a lot more to that.
Yeah.
And so I think as Catholics, we have to ask ourselves that serious question, that kind of gut check, mm-hmm. right? Is my model of my life of health and holiness, my life of flourishing, is it truly Jesus?
Right.
Is it in his image and his likeness? Or am I striving after somebody else's image? Mm-hmm. Maybe some set of expectations and values I've received from my family, or maybe some image I've gotten from the media, or maybe some health influencer that, I listen to online.
Right.
Mm-hmm. These people, you don't know who these people are or what they are. They could, they could have a mental illness for all you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be careful who you model your life after.
Right.
But I'm curious, did you save any of the pictures of the previous Andrew and maybe remind yourself?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's photos. There's photos.
But you used them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're saying so like my headshot. Yeah. No, not quite like that. But this idea, I think, of also there's a danger of being visually motivated, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. right? Overvaluing the picture, the surface over the character, the deeper self.
Do you think, Andrew, part of the issue is we only think of Jesus as, kind of this spiritual guru, the rabbi who gives us all these wonderful sayings, and, we don't really look at him as giving us anything that has to do with physical health. So I think, it's like I don't think I've seen a self-help book that, Jesus helps you lose weight or Jesus helps you. So, I mean, how do you get to that, to understand that wholeness that you're talking about?
Yeah,
here?
the Jesus diet, right?
Yeah, the Jesus diet.
The Jesus diet.
Yeah.
Well, what I talked about in the previous week was just the reality of how we're in such a different context.
Right.
Right. Jesus, largely, they didn't have a big conundrum of what am I going to eat.
Exactly.
They ate what was there, what was given, what was available, what was cooked for them, what the kid got out of his basket that day during the Sermon on the Mount.
That's right.
But one of the things that drove Jesus' life was how radically given he was to his mission. Mm-hmm. Right? He marched around Palestine for 3 years. Mm-hmm. He was, by being given to his mission, right, his health followed as a consequence of being given to that mission. Uh-huh. Right? I think we get in trouble because how do we end our day? We sit in front of the TV with a bag of potato chips, right?
Yeah, right.
So we're not as radically given to anything in particular,
right,
except for our own comfort and entertainment in our society. So I think that's really the model. We need to be given to a mission in our vocation, in our work, in our apostolate. And I think if we fully give ourselves over to mission, right, the rest follows along.
Andrew, I'm going to jump in real quick, and I just want to ask this because there are choices we can make, right, that have to do with our physical body, losing weight, better choices that we can make. But one of the struggles that people go through is envy about a thing that they don't have by nature. I'm not a good-looking guy. There are great-looking guys out there. I'm not the most attractive woman in the world, and they're attractive. We're always comparing ourselves, and then sometimes, and I think I've seen this, there becomes an anger toward God because he made so-and-so to look this way, but not me. I'm lacking that no matter what I do from a disciplinary point of view. How do we balance that? How do we come to the Lord even with those pains?
Yeah, well, science has showed us that a significant amount of our appearance is determined by our genetics. Mm-hmm. The proportions of your figure. Yep. So there's kind of a range of kind of bigger or smaller you can be.
Right.
But the general frame is kind of given to us by nature itself. Mm-hmm. So I think a big part of this comes down to, are we willing to receive the gift of ourselves that God has given us?
Yeah.
So don't be angry at God, be angry at your parents. No, I'm just kidding.
Or ponder, as opposed to, looking at yourself and judging how you are, looking at yourself and pondering, wondering, Lord, why? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
what is this about? What are you communicating to me? Right? What's the gift of myself that I'm supposed to receive from you?
Yep.
But then also, how can I love myself in a way that honors you?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a basic fundamental posture toward our physicality, toward our body, toward ourself that we have to shift in ourselves as Christians in order to approach ourselves. Because if you're in the comparison game,
right,
yeah.
It's
There's always somebody smarter, prettier, handsomer. Yeah.
Amen.
That's the way it is.
But also under what pretense? Like, what's the value of prettiness or smartness or what have you?
Yeah.
Right. So there's such an individuation in our lives, but also with it all, we don't know where that other person is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. So, there's a place of getting thin where you're actually less healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And a lot of the people on those covers of those magazines, whether it be their mental health or their physical health, they're actually not that particularly healthy.
Yeah.
They've achieved an appearance by kind of harming themselves.
Exactly. I love, and I hope we'll come back to it, is your idea of mission, mission driven, because I noticed that in my own life with fasting. When it was all about trying to lose weight, it didn't work. When it was about the Lord, it worked. It was fasting. Yeah.
Amen. Next week, we're going to talk about vocation.
Yay!
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Andrew Reinhart, ladies and gentlemen, Becoming Gift.